A jewelry store ignored an elderly black woman. The next day, she bought the company and fired the. Don't forget to subscribe to the Stories of Life's Axe channel. And before we continue this story, let us know where you are from. If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to subscribe as we release videos every day at 12:30 p.m. In the late afternoon, the bright lights on Fifth Avenue reflected off the glass windows of luxury stores. Inside one of New York's most lavish jewelry shops, diamonds sparkled under the chandelier lights, capturing the gaze of wealthy customers. An elderly woman, dignified yet dressed simply, slowly walked into the store. She wore an old gray wool coat, a slightly worn black leather handbag, and shoes with scuffed soles. Her hair was touched with gray, and although her face bore wrinkles, it still carried an air of elegance, with eyes full of wisdom. Olivia Walker paused in front of a display case showcasing expensive jewelry. Her eyes followed a delicate platinum necklace featuring a deep blue sapphire. Inside the store, the staff were busy attending to other customers, well-dressed individuals draped in expensive designer outfits. No one paid attention to Olivia. After a moment, Olivia slowly walked up to the counter and spoke. "Excuse me, may I see this necklace?" A young saleswoman behind the counter, Jessica, glanced at Olivia from head to toe. Her gaze clearly reflected disdain. "I'm sorry, but this necklace is very expensive," Jessica said with a dismissive smile. "Are you sure you want to see it?" Olivia raised an eyebrow. "I do not see any rule that says I cannot look." Jessica scoffed, glanced at another staff member, and shrugged, as if to imply that this was just an insignificant customer not worth attending to. She then turned her attention to a couple entering the store, a man in a shiny Armani suit and a woman carrying a Chanel bag. "Welcome, dear customers. We have the latest jewelry designs just arrived. Please feel free to take a look." Jessica quickly changed her tone, leaving Olivia standing quietly by the display case. Olivia didn't hurry to leave. She stood still, observing how the staff treated the other customers. The elegantly dressed ladies and gentlemen entering the store were greeted warmly. They were served tea and carefully introduced to each piece of expensive jewelry. But when she looked back at herself in the reflection of the glass, what did she see? An old woman, dressed plainly, treated as invisible. Olivia gave a faint smile, but there was a sharp glint in her eyes. She turned and walked out of the store, leaving behind mocking glances. But what no one knew was that just after one night, the entire jewelry store would belong to her. Olivia Walker stood still in front of the store for a moment, took a deep breath, and then turned to walk back inside. She was not the type to give up easily, especially when she felt she had been treated unfairly. This time, she walked straight to the counter and repeated her question. "Can you show me that necklace?" Jessica, the saleswoman, let out a slight, annoyed sigh, as if Olivia were wasting her precious time. She didn't answer right away, but crossed her arms, looking at Olivia with a gaze full of disdain. "Ma'am," Jessica said, her tone tinged with mockery, "I don't think this piece would be quite within your budget." Olivia narrowed her eyes. "What do you mean by that?" Jessica shrugged, then looked over Olivia's simple outfit. "I'm not implying anything. It is just that ... Our customers typically have very refined tastes, and they tend to care about pieces that match their style." Olivia immediately understood what Jessica was implying. She didn't wear expensive clothes, didn't adorn herself with luxury jewelry, and above all, she was an older woman of color. In the eyes of this saleswoman, perhaps she had no business stepping foot in here, let alone shopping. "Are you saying I cannot afford it?" Olivia asked, her voice calm but filled with authority. Jessica gave a forced smile, maintaining her arrogant attitude. "I am just trying to save you time. This store caters to customers with high demands. Perhaps you should go to another store more suited to you." Those words struck Olivia like a knife. This wasn't the first time in her life she had faced discrimination, but that didn't make it any less painful. She turned her head and looked around the store. The wealthy customers were still being warmly attended to. A young white woman walked in, holding a Louis Vuitton handbag. Immediately, another employee rushed over with a bright smile. "Hello, We just received a new collection of diamond rings today. I think you will really love them." Olivia turned back to Jessica, her gaze sharp. "You haven't even asked me if I want to buy anything, yet you've quickly concluded that I don't belong in this store." Jessica pouted, not bothering to hide her attitude. "I am just doing my job, ma'am." Olivia remained silent for a moment, then smiled a calm smile, but with a hint of something more. She nodded, turned, and left the store, leaving behind the faint sound of laughter from Jessica and some of the other staff members. But they didn't know that, just after one night, they would all have to pay the price for their attitude that day. The next morning, as the sun rose above the New York skyline, its golden light cast down on the towering buildings. On the bustling Fifth Avenue, high-end stores began another workday, and the luxurious jewelry store from the previous day was no exception. Inside the store, Jessica and the other staff were chatting about the customers from the day before. "Oh my God. Yesterday, an old woman who looked like she was wandering the streets came in asking to see a platinum necklace," Jessica said, sneering. "It was ridiculous. I bet she did not even have enough money to buy a silver ring." Another employee laughed. "Yeah, I thought she would try to ask for a discount." The group burst out laughing, unaware of the figure of a man in a black suit walking into the store with two people following him. The middle-aged man had a dignified presence, sharp eyes, and a professional demeanor. He looked around before speaking in a deep, authoritative voice. "Excuse me, who is the manager here?" The manager, a man named Richard, quickly stepped forward with a polite smile. "Yes, I am the manager. How can I assist you, sir?" The man handed over a business card and said clearly, "I am David Carter, the attorney representing Mrs. Olivia Walker, the new owner of this store." The atmosphere in the store instantly fell into silence. Jessica furrowed her brow, blinking rapidly, as if she could not believe what she had just heard. The new owner. Richard was also stunned for a few seconds before he gave an awkward smile. "I am sorry, but I believe you are mistaken. The owner of this store is the Anderson and Company Group, and I haven't received any notice about a change in ownership." Attorney David smiled and slowly took out a stack of documents, handing them to Richard. "Here is the official contract. Last night, Mrs. Olivia Walker finalized the purchase of the entire jewelry store chain, including this branch. Starting today, she is the one with full authority here." The store seemed to explode. Some employees gaped, while others whispered, unable to believe their ears. Jessica stammered, her voice shaking. It is impossible. How could she afford to buy a big company like this?" At that moment, the glass door opened and Olivia Walker walked in. She was no longer the elderly woman in simple clothes from yesterday. Today, she wore a high-end navy blue suit with every seam expertly crafted, showcasing her elegance. A silk Hermes scarf was gently draped around her neck, and she carried an elegant Chanel handbag. Her hair was neatly styled, her high-heeled shoes shone brightly, and most importantly, she exuded the powerful aura of a woman in control. Olivia slowly walked to the center of the store, her gaze sweeping over every employee. The ones who had looked down on her yesterday now lowered their heads, none daring to speak. Jessica, who had mocked her the most yesterday, now looked as pale as a sheet of paper. She stammered, "Mrs. Walker?" Olivia stared directly at Jessica, her eyes cold. A slight smile appeared on her lips. "You seem surprised," she said slowly, each word carving through the air. "Yesterday, you looked down on me, thinking I could not afford the necklace in this store. Today, not only did I buy it, but I also bought this entire store." The entire store fell silent. No one dared to move. Jessica turned pale, swallowing hard, trying to find an explanation. "Mrs. Walker, I didn't mean to offend you. I was just following the store's procedures." Olivia gave a cold smile. "What is your procedure? Is it to judge customers based on their appearance? Is it to decide who deserves to be served and who does not?" Jessica lowered her head, unable to respond. Olivia continued, "I have lived long enough to understand that the way a person treats others when they think that person has no power is exactly who they truly are." She turned to Richard, the manager. You knew about this since yesterday, yet you did not bother to inform your staff. Richard quickly shook his head. No, I truly didn't know. Olivia raised her hand, stopping him from speaking. No need for excuses. I am not here to listen to justifications. I am here to change things. Her gaze swept across the entire store, and then she spoke firmly. From today, there will be no place here for discrimination. She then turned back to Jessica, her smile fading. And the first thing I will do, as the new owner, is to fire you. Jessica froze. You can't do that. I have worked here for 3 years, ! I am the best salesperson here. Olivia raised an eyebrow. The best ? And yet, you let a customer walk out of the store just because you thought they did not have money. Jessica stammered, but could not say anything more. Some of the other employees exchanged nervous glances, seemingly worried about their own fate. Olivia continued, I do not need salespeople who are only good at judging customers by their appearance. I need people who know how to respect everyone, no matter who they are. She turned to Richard. I will review the management team. If you share the same attitude as she does, then you will not be needed here either. Richard turned pale. No, I understand, Mrs. Walker. I will make sure this does not happen again. Olivia nodded, then turned to the remaining employees. Those of you who are willing to change, I will give you a chance. But if anyone feels they do not fit with the new way of working, you are free to leave right now. No one spoke. Olivia smiled slightly. Good. She turned to her lawyer. We have a meeting with the board of directors. I want the company's entire policy to change, starting today. And with a decisive step, Olivia Walker left the store, leaving behind astonished looks and the confusion of those who had once looked down on her, beginning a new era for the store. After leaving the jewelry store, Olivia Walker and attorney David Carter stepped into the luxurious limousine waiting outside. The driver immediately opened the car door, bowing respectfully as she entered. Shall we head to the boardroom, ma'am? David asked once they were both seated in the plush leather seats. Olivia nodded, her gaze directed out the window. The crowds on Fifth Avenue were still bustling, unaware that a major change was about to unfold in the business world. Looking at her calm and authoritative demeanor, no one would imagine that just yesterday she had been a customer treated with disdain in the very store she had just purchased. But those who knew her well understood Olivia Walker was not an ordinary woman. 30 years ago, New York in the 1990s was not an easy place to live for a young black woman like Olivia Walker. Born into a working-class poor family, she understood firsthand what injustice, discrimination, and the invisible barriers society imposes on people like her were all about. Her father was a construction worker, and her mother worked as a maid for a wealthy family. They worked tirelessly to raise their 4 children, but life was never easy. Olivia was not like the other kids in the poor neighborhood where she grew up. She always yearned for something bigger. While her peers accepted manual labor jobs to make a living, she spent hours in the public library, reading books on economics, business, and the stories of people who had risen from nothing. At the age of 18, Olivia won a full scholarship to a prestigious university. But even in an academic environment, she still had to face the skeptical glances of wealthy white students. On one occasion, a professor bluntly told her, "A person like you might be better suited for a simple job rather than pursuing business." Those words didn't discourage Olivia. On the contrary, they made her more determined. She graduated with honors and began working in the financial sector. The early years were difficult. She was rejected, underestimated, and pushed aside in important meetings. But she did not give up. Through perseverance and her talents, she gradually built a reputation in the investment world. She founded her own company, specializing in mergers, acquisitions, and business restructuring. She believed in giving opportunities to those whom society had forgotten, the black women, immigrants, and those who had been rejected simply because of their background. Over 3 decades, she acquired numerous companies, turning struggling businesses into powerful corporations. And today, that jewelry store was just a small transaction in the long list of her accomplishments. Back to the present. The limousine came to a stop in front of the luxurious office building where the board of directors of Anderson and Company was headquartered. Olivia stepped out of the car, her gaze sharp as she looked up at the towering floors of the building. Today, she was not just here to confirm her ownership of the jewelry store chain. She was here to set a new vision. David opened the door for her and said, "They are waiting for you in the conference room. I have arranged everything." Olivia nodded. "Good. Let them see that the times have changed." She entered the building, every step she took carrying the strength of a woman who had fought her entire life to earn this position. And she would not let anyone forget that. Inside the Anderson and Company headquarters building, the atmosphere was tense in the 30th floor conference room. The senior executives sat around a long mahogany table, papers and financial reports laid in front of them. An elderly man in a pricey gray suit tapped his fingers lightly on the table. He was Charles Anderson, the son of the company's founder and its largest shareholder, before Olivia Walker came along. So she really bought the controlling shares of the company? ? Another director, James Thornton, asked skeptically. In just one night? Not just bought it, another voice chimed in. She purchased the entire chain of our high-end jewelry stores. Charles sneered, curling his lips. A woman of her age, who has never worked in the jewelry industry, wants to run this company. Let's wait and see what she can do. At that moment, the conference room door opened. Olivia Walker walked in. Without any introductions, all eyes turned to her. Today, she was no longer the woman who had been looked down upon in the jewelry store the day before. She wore a pristine white suit that radiated power. Her high heels clicked sharply against the marble floor, a declaration that she was not here to negotiate, she was here to take control. She didn't rush to sit down. Her eyes scanned each face before her, one by one, as if evaluating their worth. Olivia's voice was calm but clear. "Shall we begin?" Charles Anderson leaned back in his chair, arms crossed in front of his chest, his gaze challenging. "Miss Walker," he said, as though speaking to someone of a lower class, "I must say, we are all quite surprised by your deal. But I wonder, do you really understand the jewelry industry? Or is this just a power play?" A few others nodded, waiting to see how Olivia would react. They were used to seeing women being sidelined in the male-dominated business world. They thought she would be flustered, explain herself, or try to convince them. But Olivia merely smiled lightly, unfazed. "I do not need to understand the jewelry industry," she replied. "I just need to understand how to make money." The room fell silent. She placed a stack of documents on the table. "Look at the numbers. The profit of this jewelry store chain has dropped 15% over the past 3 years. Why?" She didn't wait for anyone to respond. "Because you are losing customers. You focus only on the wealthy and ignore the middle class, who are actually the biggest spenders today. They crave luxury products, but at reasonable prices. And what do? You let your staff stand there, judging customers based solely on their appearance." Her gaze was cold, piercing Charles. "I witnessed it with my own eyes." Charles turned red, but still tried to maintain his composure. "So what are you going to do? Turn this luxury brand into a chain of budget stores?" Olivia laughed. "No, I'm going to do what none of you have ever done. I will adapt to the times." She flipped to another page of the report and pushed it toward them. "Here is my plan. Completely redesign the brand, expand into the online market, and create a top-tier customer service system where anyone who steps into the store is treated like a VIP, no matter how they look." She leaned back in her chair, her gaze sharp. "Anyone who disagrees with this plan can leave today." James Thornton suddenly spoke up. "But how did you manage to buy up all the shares so quickly? Who helped you execute this deal?" A smile briefly appeared on Olivia's lips. "I have had a plan for the past 20 years. Everyone froze. "What did you just say?" Charles furrowed his brow. "I have been tracking this company for 2 decades. I waited for the right moment when you weakened, when this company needed a real leader. She crossed her arms in front of her chest. And I had a strong partner backing me to make this happen. The conference room door opened once again. A well-dressed black man in a sharp black suit entered. Everyone gasped. It was Marcus Walker, Olivia Walker's son. Marcus was a successful entrepreneur, well known in the venture capital world. He was the one who had secretly acquired shares and partnered with his mother to carry out this plan. "Good afternoon, gentlemen," Marcus said, a confident smile on his face. "I am honored to be part of this game." Charles clenched his fists. He realized he had been completely defeated. Olivia stood up. "So do we have a deal?" No one dared to object. Charles reluctantly nodded. "You have won." Olivia smiled softly. "I didn't win or lose. I simply took back what was always mine." And just like that, Olivia Walker didn't just buy a jewelry chain, she changed an entire system, an outdated operation, and a discriminatory mindset that had been in place for years. This wasn't just the victory of one person. It was the victory of justice, persistence, and those who had been underestimated. And she would make sure no one ever forgot that. The atmosphere in the conference room was thick after Olivia Walker's declaration. The faces that had once been full of arrogance now held a hint of unease. They were accustomed to power, used to controlling everything, but today they had been dethroned by a woman they had once looked down on. Charles Anderson, the man who had once mocked Olivia, leaned back in his chair, his face as pale as a sheet. He had lost control of the company his family had built for decades. Olivia looked at him, her gaze sharp as a knife. "Now, Charles," she said slowly, "tell me, what do you think of the customer service at Anderson and Company's jewelry stores?" Charles jumped in his seat. He understood this was no longer just a regular board meeting. This was revenge, and he was the one being judged. James Thornton swallowed hard, trying to regain control of the situation. "Mrs. Walker," he said, "I think all of us can sit down and discuss." Olivia raised her hand, signaling him to stop. "No need," she said. "I have already made my decision." She pushed a stack of documents toward them. The termination of the partnership agreement. "Some people in this room may continue working for the company," she said, "but others will not." Her gaze stopped on Charles and 3 other senior executives, those who had sided with him in maintaining a culture of discrimination in the company. "Today is your last day here." Charles clenched his fists. "You can't do this," he shouted. "I have dedicated my life to this company." "I? No, Charles," Olivia coldly interrupted. "You have destroyed this company." She stood up, gathering her documents. "Your cars are waiting downstairs. Security will escort you out." 2 security personnel entered. Those being fired had no choice but to leave in disgrace. As they walked out of the conference room, Charles looked back at Olivia one last time. "You will destroy everything my father and I built." Olivia smiled. "No, I will rebuild it, and this time it will truly be great." 2 weeks later, a major change took place in the Anderson and Company jewelry store system. The old sign on Fifth Avenue was replaced with a new name, Walker Jewels. Business magazines reported widely on the groundbreaking deal. One of the most prestigious jewelry brands in America has been taken over by a black female entrepreneur who was once looked down upon by the very system she now owns. Olivia Walker has proven that persistence, determination, and intelligence can change an empire. From a customer who faced discrimination, she has become the true owner of the corporation. In front of the Walker Jewels store, a long line of people stood, eager to witness the stunning transformation. No longer were there employees who judged customers with their eyes. No longer were there furrowed brows when someone who did not look like a millionaire entered. Now anyone was greeted with a genuine smile. Olivia stood before the large glass window, looking into the newly transformed store, once a symbol of discrimination, now a place that celebrated fairness and opportunity. Next to her, Marcus Walker smiled. "Are you satisfied with the result, Mom?" Olivia took a deep breath. Satisfied. She was not just satisfied, she was proud. She had fought not only for herself, but for all those who had been looked down upon, who had been deemed inferior simply because they did not fit society's prejudices. She turned to her son, her eyes filled with meaning. This is just the beginning, son, and the world would remember the name Olivia Walker. Thank you all for watching until the end. If you enjoyed the video, do not forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss out on the best stories. See you in the next one.